Hi, my name is Elena, and I'm going to present to you my quarterly update on the habit sourcing project. I've been working with Zombies Interactive in particular. So, the problem motivation. Habit sourcing has demonstrated the effectiveness of using storyline driven interactions to help people build healthy habits while simultaneously crowdsourcing data about their environment. Yes, this was shown in the WIST paper. But habit sourcing has a few shortcomings. For instance, it gathers only low fidelity data. The habit sourcing applications shown in the WIST paper only gather location based data about objects, not additional attribute based data. And citizen science researchers would need higher fidelity data in order to meet their needs. Furthermore, habit sourcing, as it currently stands, risks losing novelty for users without location awareness and personalization. So, interactions can become kind of boring and trite if you hear the same things over and over again. And if you were hearing the same things over and over again as a user of a habit sourcing application, then you might just pick the iTunes, Apple Store, like solutions that exist, like Zombies Run, for instance. So the solution is a scaffolded habit sourcing, which is essentially pulling data from the data set that habit sourcing has collected thus far in order to know what known objects in a user's areas are, and then um, asking the user to perform interactions based on the objects that are nearby, um, with the goal of gathering additional data about those objects. Okay, so research questions relevant to scaffolded habit sourcing. How can we build scaffolded habit sourcing applications that successfully ask users to collect detailed discriminatory data about objects in order to produce a comprehensive data set for citizen science researchers? Follow-up to that is how can we use specifically the data that we've previously obtained from prior habit sourcing application uses in order to create novel habit sourcing interactions that keep the user coming back to the application, keep them engaged in future habit sourcing experiences. Need finding results, I kind of just consider these what I found out at the end of fall quarter, and my observation was that users seem to like some sort of relationship between either the object and the interaction, the object and the storyline, or the object's attribute and interaction, or the attribute and the storyline. But I hadn't pinpointed that relationship that they enjoyed because the format of my study last quarter was such that each user tested a different subset of interactions, so I didn't get enough opinions on each interaction that I got to test. So I had to start with that this quarter. My system design and architecture has changed quite a bit. So at the beginning of this quarter, Parse was shutting down, which is a backend as a service, and so I had to migrate my backend to MLab, which is a MongoDB database, and Heroku, which is the current server. And I've been working with Zombies Interactive, but I migrated ZenWalk as well. But as it stands, the architecture is still iPhone application communicating with a server, communicating with a database, and vice versa. So my study design, I ran a study each sprint this quarter, and basically the general format of a study is I place the user in a habit sourcing experience, which basically means I set them up with a copy of Zombies Interactive, which has the interactions that I'm testing for that particular sprint. There's usually 4 interactions, and then I send them off on a run or a walk, whatever is their speed, with Zombies Interactive, and I follow them and watch them, see if they perform interactions, etc. This experience lasts about 8 to 12 minutes. And then after the experience is over, I ask each user some questions in a post-experience interview. So sprint by sprint, here's kind of what I learned. In Sprint 1, I learned that users actually didn't really care about pairing object and storyline. They cared more about object and action having some sort of relationship. In Sprint 2, I learned that users like object plus action learnability, so there has to be whatever object I'm trying to gather more data about, I should make the interaction. Oh, well, I'm gonna skip this version. That was inconvenient Java. Sorry. So I'm going to make sure that whatever action that I have the user do be an affordance of that object. So that's what I mean by learnability. In Sprint 3, I learned that actions should foster healthy habits, as in, like, I shouldn't just send a user out in a run and tell them to tiptoe because that's not something someone would do in a run. Like, low lunges might be more preferable. And in Sprint 4, I was thinking that the order of the actions might matter, as in some interactions would be better at the beginning of a run versus the middle of a run versus the end of the run, but that was totally dependent on runner experience, whether the runner was an avid runner or someone that, like, didn't run regularly, so that's something that will need to be explored further. I highlighted sprints 2 and 3 because those two sprints in particular really led me to these two core findings that I'm about to present. And the first is that scaffolded habit sourcing interactions should contain actions that improve the user's habit building practice. Again, this is what I was talking about when I was saying that, sure, like, tiptoeing might be a way of being cautious in, like, your day-to-day life, but no one would want to tiptoe during a run. They would prefer some sort of activity that complements their running and makes them a better runner, like lunging, butt kicks, calf raises, things like that. My second core finding was to gather data about a particular attribute of an object. Scaffolded habit sourcing interactions should prompt the user to perform an action that complements that attribute. So this is kind of the learnability I was talking about earlier. And one good example of this was in one of my sprints, I had users perform calf raises on a ramp, but they thought that it didn't make sense to perform calf raises on a ramp, as in calf raises weren't an affordance of a ramp, but in the next sprint I set them up to do calf raises on a stair, or on a set of stairs, and the response to that was overwhelmingly better, like, oh, this makes sense, like, one would do calf raises on some sort of, like, stair-like thing in the gym, so it would make sense to do this outside as well. Some limitations of each of my studies this quarter, not as many as last quarter, which is pretty cool. So one of them was I really didn't probe users on their answers to my post-experience interview questions until Sprint 4, which means that some of the data that I gathered doesn't, like, really prove or disprove my design arguments. Like, I didn't ask enough questions of the users in order to make sure that I got what I needed for my design arguments, and I think I learned my lesson and got a lot better results from Sprint 4. Furthermore, I feel like some of my design arguments sounded too similar, and I almost wonder if I should have avoided that in order to make more progress this quarter. I guess I'm not experienced enough in writing design arguments to really know if I should have pushed further, but I'm pretty happy with the core findings that I got, but that's something I'd like to discuss for the future. So what's next for habit sourcing? Well, we have design principles for scaffolded habit sourcing started, so might as well continue to grow them. Furthermore, I haven't been writing algorithms in order to detect whether someone is doing, like, low lunges or butt kicks or some of these newer interactions, so building and testing algorithms will be important next quarter. Furthermore, this may be a far future goal, but deviation might be a subject to explore in habit sourcing, because I imagine a scenario in which, yes, we've shown scaffolded habit sourcing works, but maybe a user tends to take certain paths more than others. So some objects have sparse data associated with them and others have a lot of data. So deviation might be a means of drawing users to objects that have sparse data in order to get like an evenly populated data set across objects. Um, it's a longer goal though. Cool. So that was winter 2017. Hoping for more awesomeness in the future.